You guys ready? Great. Good afternoon, everybody. How are we? Good to see you all. I have a few announcements off the top today. On April 14th, President Trump will welcome President Bukele of El Salvador for an official working visit here at the White House. They will discuss El Salvador's partnership on using their Supermax prison for Tren de Aragua and MS-13 gang members, and how El Salvador's cooperation with the United States has become a model for others to work with this administration. On April 17th, President Trump will welcome Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni of Italy for an official working visit at the White House as well. The president's thoughts also remain with the families and communities experiencing devastating loss from the severe storms and flooding affected several states across the central U.S. President Trump approved emergency declarations for Arkansas, Kentucky, and Tennessee, allowing FEMA to provide federal assistance like equipment and resources to support state and local emergency response officials who are leading this response on the ground. Last night, the Supreme Court delivered a massive legal victory to the Trump administration and allowed us to continue removing foreign terrorist invaders under the Alien Enemies Act. This was a smackdown to a rogue left-wing, low-level district court judge who have relentlessly tried to stop President Trump from using his core constitutional powers as head of the executive branch and as commander-in-chief. The highest court in the land made it clear that the President of the United States has the power to protect our homeland and forcibly remove foreign terrorists who pose a grave threat to families and communities. Thank you to the Supreme Court for upholding the rule of law and protecting the Constitution. Our message to the monster Tren de Aragua and MS-13 terrorists still hiding illegally inside our country is clear. Deport yourself now, or you will be locked up and sent back to your home country. On another matter, the historic Liberation Day announcement last week by President Trump made it very clear that the era of American economic surrender is over. President Trump is no longer going to allow American workers and companies to be ripped off at the hands of foolish trade practices that shipped away millions of high-paying jobs and hollowed out communities across the country. It's America first, all the way. And despite fear-mongering by the media, the world is clearly responding to President Trump's approach. Just yesterday, President Trump held a bilateral meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu here at the White House. The Prime Minister pledged to immediately eliminate America's trade deficit with Israel and remove their trade barriers. Israel's proactive approach should serve as a model for the rest of the world. Also yesterday, the President spoke with Japan's Prime Minister, who wants to negotiate as well. The President also spoke to the acting President of South Korea this morning. He has tasked Secretary Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer to lead these talks. In total, since the Liberation Day announcement, nearly 70 countries have already reached out to the President to begin a negotiation. Countries are falling over themselves to reform their unfair trade practices and free open their markets to our country. Why? Because these countries greatly respect President Trump in the sheer power of the American market. These countries realize they've gotten filthy rich over the past few decades by imposing substantial tariffs on American-made products and ridiculous non-monetary barriers to block out American industry. The jig is up. Past American presidents sat by and let this happen, but President Trump stood up for our country, and he is saying no more. The president's message has been simple and consistent from the beginning. To countries around the world, bring us your best offers, and he will listen. Deals will only be made if they benefit American workers and address our nation's crippling trade deficits. America does not need other countries as much as other countries need us, and President Trump knows this. He's going to use the leverage of our markets and our country to the advantage of the people he was sworn in to represent. On the other hand, countries like China, who have chosen to retaliate and try to double down on their mistreatment of American workers, are making a mistake. President Trump has a spine of steel, and he will not break, and America will not break under his leadership. He is guided by a firm belief that America must be able to produce essential goods for our own people and export them to the rest of the world. A strong America cannot be solely dependent on foreign countries for our food, medicines, and critical minerals. And America must always maintain a robust defense supply chain. Reprioritizing and strengthening our manufacturing industry are essential national and economic security issues of the utmost importance to President Trump. By focusing on supercharging the onshoring of American manufacturing, the president is already delivering on his promise to usher in an economic golden age for our country. Just look at Friday's jobs report, which smashed expectations for the second straight month. The American economy added 228,000 jobs, nearly 100,000 more jobs than economists predicted, and the fourth highest month for private payroll growth in the past 2 years. There was also a sharp increase in transportation, construction, and warehousing employment. And in just 11 weeks, President Trump has secured more than $1.5 trillion in private sector investment. This is $500 billion more than Joe Biden secured in his entire term. This record-breaking private sector investment will create roughly 350,000 American jobs and counting. If you add up all of the investment pledges from foreign governments, President Trump has secured an incredible $5 trillion in total investments already. In the months ahead, President Trump's pro-growth economic agenda will be fully realized. The largest deregulatory effort in American history is underway. Unnecessary, burdensome, costly red tape is being eliminated by this entire federal government every day, driving down costs and massively boosting small businesses. So far, President Trump's deregulation effort has already saved Americans more than $180 billion, equivalent to $2,100 per family of 4. The president's drill baby drill energy agenda, which he will discuss later this evening in the East Room, is capitalizing on the abundance of natural resources under our feet to generate more affordable electricity, cheap gas, and quality new jobs. All of this will combine to end the Biden-imposed cost of living crisis that's absolutely crushed American families. Under President Trump, the American energy industry will lead the globe over the next century, delivering lower prices and significantly strengthening our country's economic position. At the president's direction, Republicans in Congress are working quickly to pass one big, beautiful bill, which will also include the largest tax cut in American history. As President Trump has said, the House must pass this budget resolution quickly. Here in our new media seat today, we have Jasmine Wright, the White House reporter for Notice. Notice is a nonprofit and nonpartisan news site which launched in early 2024. They've gained millions of readers across the country since. The newsroom's goal is both to inform readers and train the next generation of politics and policy journalists. They also partner with state newsrooms to give local communities more knowledge of what their representatives are doing in Washington, D.C. With that, please kick us off, Jasmine.
Thanks so much, Karoline. A couple questions for you. The first one being, can you explain the White House's evolution from this is not a negotiation on tariffs to countries should pitch us and start negotiations on tariffs?
As the president said yesterday, Jasmine, both things can be true at the same time. And it is a non-negotiable position that the United States has faced a national security and economic crisis because of the unfair trade practices by countries around the world. As for the president, I have maintained this position. The entire administration has always said that President Trump is willing to pick up the phone and talk. And the president met with his trade team this morning, and he directed them to have tailor-made trade deals with each and every country that calls up this administration to strike a deal. And listen, and each and every one of these trade deals should be tailored and unique based on that country's markets, based on that country's exports, the imports here in the United States of America. What makes the most sense for the American worker and for our industry? The president is focused on putting America first.
So was the evolution not factored in or determined by kind of the tumult in the stock market? Was that not a part of the consideration to start making these negotiations and deals?
Again, I would reject that there was an evolution. On day one, we had said that the president will always pick up the phone for other nations and other companies that call this administration. The president always has a listening ear, and it's a non-negotiable fact that America has faced a national security and economic crisis for many decades, and President Trump is just the first to address this.
And then my last question, how will negotiations change how much revenue the White House is planning to make from the tariffs?
Well, that has yet to be seen, but as the president said, the reciprocal tariffs, which will continue to go in effect as these deals are negotiated and ongoing, will generate trillions of dollars in revenue to the United States. And this is twofold. The president wants to onshore jobs here to the United States of America. He wants to boost our manufacturing industry. He also wants to tackle these crippling deficits with almost every single country around the world. Jackie.
Thanks, Caroline. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, warned that some of these negotiations might take up to months, that we could be doing this through April, May, and into June. And then you had Kevin Hassett say it's going to take a lot for the president to put his signature on the line, because he wants to make sure there's a good deal for America. Is the president operating on any sort of a timeline or deadline where he wants this completed by?
Well, we always move at Trump speed here at the White House, which is incredibly fast. I know you all know that from covering this White House day to day. The president likes to get things done, but he's very much focused on ensuring that these deals are good for the American worker, they are good for American manufacturing, and again, that they tackle these crippling deficits with these countries. All options are on the table for each country, but again, these are going to be tailor-made deals. They are not going to be off-the-rack deals, as the president has called it, and he has directed his entire trade team to be part of this effort. So that includes Secretary Bessent and our National Economic Director, Kevin Hassett. It also includes Secretary Lutnick, Peter Navarro, the entire trade team, Jamison Greer, who was on the Hill today. Everybody who was involved in this incredible, fair, reciprocal trade agenda will continue to be involved in negotiating these deals.
And then yesterday, Goldman Sachs put out a research note. It put the odds of a recession at 45% within the next 12 months, up from 35%. But Peter Navarro guaranteed last night no recession. Does the president agree with him on that? I know that the president in the past has been leery of making definitive statements on that.
I can speak for the president, and I can speak for the optimism that he sees in our economy every day. Again, when you talk about the massive deregulatory efforts that are happening across the board, when you talk about how oil prices are down, gas prices are down, egg prices are down, we're cutting costs for the American worker, for the American consumer. We also see trillions of dollars of investments pouring into this country every day, and we're working hard now on the tariff side of the president's economic agenda. But don't forget, the next side of this is tax cuts, and we're counting on Capitol Hill to get those done, the largest tax cuts in history.
Does that mean that without those tax cuts coming through, that the likelihood of a recession is greater?
No, that's not what I said. I'm just saying be mindful of the whole of government economic approach that this administration is taking every day. Sure. Go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline. You just said that one of the reasons these tariffs are going into effect is that some countries have been ripping off the United States, but some of the tariffs target countries like Madagascar, Bangladesh, with very high levels of poverty. So can you explain how the president wants to correct the deficit with those countries? Is there a plan, for example, to onshore the textile industry that these countries are known because, and just like, can you be specific about those like low income countries?
Well, first of all, the reciprocal tariff rates that were implemented by country were focused on the monetary tariff that those countries have imposed on the United States, but also the non-monetary tariff barriers and the regulations, if you will, that have been put into effect over the years, making it harder for America to export to these countries. These were very carefully crafted numbers. There was also a 10% baseline tariff across the board, as well, as you know. Moving forward, the president will talk to any country that picks up the phone to call, and I can tell you the phones have been ringing off the hook, wanting to talk to this administration, this president, and his trade team to try to strike a deal. And it's because the world knows that they need the United States of America. They need our markets. They need our consumer. The president has a lot of leverage on his side because he has the best economy and the best country in the world that he leads, and he knows that. And it's about dang time we finally have a president who uses that economic leverage to benefit American workers. And that's what the president is trying to do. Maggie.
Caroline, thanks. Does the president endorse something that Howard Lutnick said on television this weekend, which was that the army of millions and millions of human beings screwing in little screws to make iPhones, that kind of thing is going to be moving to the U.S.? Is that how the president envisions manufacturing shifting? And if so, how long would that take, roughly?
The president wants to increase manufacturing jobs here in the United States of America, but he's also looking at advanced technologies. He's also looking at AI and emerging fields that are growing around the world that the United States needs to be a leader in as well. So there's an array of diverse jobs, more traditional manufacturing jobs, as you discussed, but also jobs in advanced technologies. The president is looking at all of those. He wants them to come back home.
But iPhones specifically, is that something that he thinks is the kind of technology that can move to the U.S.?
Absolutely. He believes we have the labor, we have the workforce, we have the resources to do it. And as you know, Apple has invested $500 billion here in the United States. So if Apple didn't think the United States could do it, they probably wouldn't have put up that big chunk of change. Elena.
Hi, Caroline. It's clear the president has gotten the world's attention with these tariffs. Is he considering at all potentially holding off on imposing some of them before the deadline, or maybe later, reversing them because he's having these negotiations and having these good talks with other leaders?
The president was asked and answered this yesterday. He said he's not considering an extension or a delay. I spoke to him before this briefing. That was not his mindset. He expects that these tariffs are going to go into effect. And you said something very important, Elena, in your question. You said the president has captivated the attention of the world. Absolutely, he has. And it's about time we have a president in the Oval Office who is putting the world on notice and is putting the American people first, and again, is using the leverage of the United States to negotiate good trade deals.
Just a quick follow-up. Sure. There's been some public sparring between Elon Musk and the president's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, on some of these tariffs. Musk actually referred to Navarro today as being, quote, dumber than a sack of bricks. Are you at all, or is the administration, the president, all concerned that this is maybe impacting the public's understanding of these tariffs? It might be messing with the message on it?
No, look, these are obviously two individuals who have very different views on trade and on tariffs. Boys will be boys, and we will let their public sparring continue. And you guys should all be very grateful that we have the most transparent administration in history. And I think it also speaks to the president's willingness to hear from all sides, that he has people at the highest levels of this government in this White House who have very diverse opinions on very diverse issues, but the president takes all opinions in mind, and then he makes the best decision based on the best interests of the American public. Tiana.
Thanks, Caroline. On Truth Social today, Trump was talking about one-stop shopping talks with foreign leaders, bringing leaders to the U.S., to Washington, and talking to them about tariffs, but also other topics. So is that part of his strategy to bring the leaders to Washington and trying to get deals, outside of tariffs on foreign policy issues as well?
I think the president, again, is going to have a custom, tailor-made approach to each and every country. And if that means discussions of foreign aid, of our military presence in these countries, how those troops are paid for, come to the table, that could be part of the negotiation in these economic negotiations. But it's the president's economic team who will be leading these. These are tariff and trade negotiations. And yes, they will be one-stop shopping for each and every country. They will be, as the president said again, tailor-made, not off the rack to each and every country, based on America's needs.
And can you confirm?
How are you? Thank you so much, Carol from Lindsay TV. So President Trump has designated Tren de Aragua as a foreign terrorist organization and deported its members while also moving to restrict Venezuela's oil exports. Is the administration preparing additional military or economic actions against Venezuela and the Maduro regime? And my second question is about Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Is the administration have a comment on her decision to go with the liberals and go actually with the Tren de Araguas? This is the same justice that actually sided against January 6th hostages last year. So is the administration have a comment? Are they disappointed in Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett?
To your first question, I don't have any actions to read out in terms of Venezuela. The president has imposed secondary tariffs on the Maduro regime and on Venezuela in the form of oil, which is obviously going to have a crippling effect on the Maduro regime, and that's the intended effect of this administration. As for the justice you mentioned, as for the Supreme Court, we've made our feelings very clear. We believe this was a massive victory. Certainly, we wish this was a 9-0 decision because we firmly believe that the president was well within his constitutional authority, and the Supreme Court made that very clear last night, and they put Judge Boasberg in his place. We called on the Supreme Court to rein in these judges who are acting as judicial activists, not real arbiters of the truth and the law, and that's exactly what we saw the Supreme Court do yesterday. Christian.
Thanks, Caroline. Now that the president's reciprocal tariffs are here, going into effect tomorrow, what's the status of the ERS? When will they actually start collecting revenue? And will that be nested under CBP or somewhere else entirely?
It's something Secretary Lutnick has taken up, so I defer you to the Department of Commerce, but it's something that he and the president believe quite strongly in, and it's a promise that they intend to keep to the American people.
Real quickly, can you explain why the president opted to send Secretary Hegseth to the dignified transfer last week instead of attending himself?
Sure. The Secretary Hegseth was there to represent the administration. The president has expressed his condolences to these families, as have I from this podium. Shelby.
Thank you. The president's trade representative this morning told senators that the president does not intend on carving out exemptions for products and companies when it comes to tariffs. But would the administration consider changing that stance should bankruptcies begin among U.S. companies who are dependent on China trade?
I won't get ahead of the president on any exemptions or his decision on that. I will leave that to him. But again, we're looking at this country by country and based on the needs of the American people and the American workforce.
And one more, can you walk us through how this specific tariff plan was decided on and which advisor came up with it?
The reciprocal tariff plan? Yes. It was a plan that was discussed by the president's entire trade team over the course of many, many meetings, and the president ultimately decided on which way to go. A few proposals were given to the president. There was debate and discussion, and the president made his decision, and as you've seen very publicly, the entire trade team is on board with this plan and the negotiations that will ensue because of it. Sure.
Karoline, on Iran, and given what's going to be happening on Saturday, what exactly is the current administration doing to stop Iran's funding of terrorist aggression worldwide that the previous administration wasn't doing?
Well, first of all, when it comes to Saturday, I won't get ahead of the president. He has said there will be direct talks with Iran on Saturday. I won't further any details from this podium for obvious reasons, security reasons. It will, provide an update as we always have. However, when it comes to Iran, the president has reimposed crippling sanctions on the Iranian regime, and he's made it very clear to Iran they have a choice to make. You can strike a deal with the president, you can negotiate, or there will be hell to pay. And as the president said yesterday, if they don't choose to move forward with diplomacy and a deal, which is the direction we do see them headed in, there will be grave consequences to pay. To the back row.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Caroline. On the president's threat yesterday on social media to increase tariffs against China by an additional 50% in response to their retaliation, has he signed anything in terms of an executive order, any documentation around that? Will that additional 50% go into effect tomorrow?
They will be going into effect at 12:01 a.m. tonight, so effectively tomorrow, yes.
Work on that today?
Of course, as always. To the gentleman in front of you, because that's who I originally called on. Go ahead.
Over the weekend, President Trump said that he would be willing to have U.S. citizens deported to El Salvador with the cooperation of President Bukele. How would that work legally, and how many people would potentially be available for that operation?
So the president has discussed this idea quite a few times publicly. He's also discussed it privately. You're referring to the president's idea for American citizens to potentially be deported. These would be heinous, violent criminals who have broken our nation's laws repeatedly. And these are violent, repeat offenders in American streets. The president has said, if it's legal, right? If there is a legal pathway to do that, he's not sure. We are not sure if there is. It's an idea that he has simply floated and has discussed very publicly as in the effort of transparency. Reagan.
Thank you, Caroline. There's been more reporting coming out now about President Biden's decline while in the White House. Is the White House considering releasing the audio of Biden's interview with Special Counsel Robert Hur to the public, which the former president had previously blocked?
I don't have an update on that, but I can certainly check. I think the American people would be quite interested to hear that tape, but I'll double check on the release of it. Thank you. Michael.
Thank you, Caroline. On Saturday, during meetings with Iran, President Trump says high-level officials will be meeting directly with Iranian officials. We're hearing some pushback from Iran now saying those talks will be indirect. Can you clarify?
They will be direct talks on Saturday, and I won't get ahead of the president on any further details. Jennifer.
Yeah, two things. On the Israel tariffs, can you give us an update on the discussion on relaxing those tariffs? And then I had another question about the Doge team after that.
That discussion is ongoing. I don't have any definitive details to iron out for you here.
And then the president on Thursday told us that there was an incredible discovery that the Doge team had made. He called it horrible and incredible. Can you reveal that yet? Give us details on what it was about?
There has been a discovery. I hate to leave you hanging on a cliff, but I don't want to get ahead of the president on that. But I can confirm there has been a discovery. It's just not quite yet ready for release. Sure. Go ahead.
Caroline, thank you.
I was calling on the young lady behind you, but I'll come to you after, Ed.
All right.
Not discriminating here.
The president's meeting today with House Republicans. Can you say who is in that meeting and his message to Republicans that are skeptical of the Senate-passed budget framework?
Sure. The president will be meeting with Republican lawmakers today here at the White House to talk to them about the framework that the Senate passed. The president was very quick to put out a statement about his support for the reconciliation package that the Senate passed, and he is counting on House Republicans to pass it. The Republicans received an overwhelming mandate from the American public to govern. We have an extraordinary opportunity. There are key promises that the president made to the American people in this bill: tax cuts, securing the border, deregulation, unleashing the might of American energy. These are good things for the American people. The president wants to see this get done, and that's why he's engaging with lawmakers today.
Just a quick follow-up on tariffs. Kevin Hassett said today that the administration is prioritizing talks with Japan and South Korea, other trading partners. Are there other countries on that list that you guys can name publicly that you're having serious discussions with?
Sure. As you have heard from various administration officials, myself included, there have been nearly 70 countries that have reached out to the administration last time I checked, but again, I hear the phones are ringing off the hook. There are foreign leaders who want to fly to Washington tonight and get on a plane to negotiate with this country, which shows you the leverage that the president is using. It shows you the rest of the world needs the United States of America to do business with. Israel, obviously, yesterday you heard a public statement from Prime Minister Netanyahu. The president has detailed his calls with the leaders of Japan and South Korea. We are going to prioritize our allies and our partners around the world first when it comes to these negotiations, and the trade team will be divvying them up again to make tailor-made trade deals around the world. Ed, go ahead. As promised.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned the 70 countries or so. I'm curious, though, under what conditions at this point would President Trump talk to President Xi about tariffs?
Look, I just spoke to the president about this, and he believes that China wants to make a deal with the United States. He believes China has to make a deal with the United States. It was a mistake for China to retaliate. The president, when America is punched, he punches back harder. That's why there will be 104% tariffs going into effect on China tonight at midnight. But the president believes that Xi and China want to make a deal. They just don't know how to get that started. And the president also wanted me to tell all of you that if China reaches out to make a deal, he'll be incredibly gracious, but he's going to do what's best for the American people.
So China has to call first?
The Chinese want to make a deal. They just don't know how to do it. But the president will be implementing these 104% tariffs on China tonight.
And under what conditions might he consider lowering tariffs on China at this point?
It would be imprudent of me to tell you those conditions here from the podium. Sure, Gabe.
Thanks, Caroline. With regards to the Supreme Court ruling on the Alien Enemies Act, you're right, it was a win for the administration, but the justices also said that deportees are entitled to due process. Does the administration agree with that?
That's not quite true, Gabe. They said that they are entitled to a habeas petition, and we are going to continue to comply with the law, and we are wholly confident that every single person that has been deported under the Alien Enemies Act, every person that will continue to be deported under the Alien Enemies Act qualifies for that deportation.
NBC News is reporting that the administration is considering drone strikes on drug cartels in Mexico. We're citing several officials. This morning, Mexico's president was asked about that, and she said that we reject any of those actions. Your response?
I saw that reporting. I don't want to confirm it from this podium. I don't want to comment on it because I'm not sure, but I would defer you to the National Security Council.
So you haven't confirmed the report, but with Mexico's president saying that she rejects any of that, what would your response be? How is the relationship then between Mexico's president and the White House right now over targeting drug cartels?
Well, first of all, the relationship between President Sheinbaum and President Trump is quite good, and I think both world leaders would tell you that. The president has been engaged directly with President Sheinbaum on a number of different topics, particularly when it comes to clamping down on the Mexican drug cartels, on clamping down on illegal immigration, human trafficking, drug trafficking through our southern border. She's taken significant steps towards doing that, but as for that specific report, again, I'm not going to comment.
Caroline,
sure.
Two questions on trade. First, as a part of these negotiations, is it possible for countries to lower their tariffs below that 10% bare minimum that's been set?
Again, I'll leave that to the president to make those determinations, but I can tell you that 10% universal baseline will go into effect as these negotiations are ongoing.
Got it. And then what is your thinking just as far as low labor cost countries? Like if you've got a country like Vietnam that wants to negotiate, but obviously they have some advantages in terms of trade, in terms of the people there are not paid as much as American citizens. What is kind of the thinking? Can they still achieve a good kind of trade outcome with the United States?
Well, again, again, you're right to point out that different countries have different labor markets. They have different skills, if you will, different resources, and the president is going to take all of that into account. His team will take all of that into account when they're negotiating these deals. I do just want to point out one thing, that the president, everybody in Washington, whether they want to admit it or not, knows that this president is right when it comes to tariffs and when it comes to trade. In fact, Democrats have long said that the United States of America has been ripped off by the countries around the world. They just don't want to admit it now because it's President Trump who is saying that. In June of 1996, Nancy Pelosi spoke on the House floor. She urged her colleagues at the time to fight against the status quo trade policies that had contributed to America's trade deficit with China. In fact, Nancy Pelosi said, "How far does China have to go? How much more repression? How big a trade deficit? How many jobs have to be lost for the American workers? How much dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, 'I will not endorse the status quo'?" Those are the words of Nancy Pelosi in 1996. Well, President Trump is finally answering her call 27 years later. Nancy Pelosi can thank President Trump today for the 104% retaliatory tariff that will be going into effect on China. In 2007, Chuck Schumer spoke of our nation's crippling trade deficit, saying these are the kinds of records the American people don't want us to be breaking. The administration needs to move beyond words, take action now to reverse a trend that threatens our prospects for future economic growth. And Chuck Schumer said that in 2007. Finally, in 2025, President Trump is taking action. Recently defeated Democrat Sherrod Brown said on deficits in 2012 that our deficit then at China had reached an all-time high, and it was on pace to recede last year's record. The trade deficit had cost American workers millions of jobs at the time. These are the words of Democrats years ago. It is about time America finally has a president who is taking action to restore those millions of jobs back to the United States of America, to boost our manufacturing industry. He's doing what's right for the American people. It will take a lot of labor. It will take a lot of effort. But that's exactly what the American people elected this president to do. He will be talking about our energy agenda at 3 o'clock today over in the East Room, as you all know. He will be signing a bill to unleash the might of our beautiful, clean coal industry in this country, which is a reliable energy source also for AI. There's a great story in Bloomberg today, actually, about the executive order that will be signed later. So we'll see you all there. I'll let the president speak more. We'll see you later. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.